Kyle here from allmediareview.blogspot.com, here to do, I'm going to try doing this list. Hopefully it won't be like the modern progressive art rock list, albums list, which was like 13 videos. But it turned out to be 200 albums. I was talking about on the blog, video blog the other day, I wanted just to do two separate videos, and I just go back and forth, and mostly what happened was I looked at the list, specifically the progressive metal, the traditional progressive metal with the clean vocals list, and I have my kitty cat Kaja who's asking for attention, so I probably should be making a video. Anyway, and it just kind of looked somewhat homogenous, like it was like basically like a ranking between basically 8 bands lists, and so it just kind of looked boring. Not boring's not the right word, but not really what I envisioned for a list. I wanted to sort of have at least some variety and some depth to it. So I decided, screw it, I'm just going to combine both lists. So I went through and did the Pub Meeple ranking with both those lists that I already ranked, which were about 100 albums apiece. And a lot of overthinking, a lot of moving stuff around, taking stuff. Yeah, so it's a lot. It's a lot, but I'm hoping this won't be as long. So I'm just gonna say, like, these are some albums that didn't end up in the list for various reasons. I don't know the bands well enough on these albums, etc., or they're just not. Like Helloween's on this. They're not prog metal exactly. They're not really, even though some bands that are similar to Helloween that kind of are. They're not. Yeah, I forgot about that folk metal band I was going to also include in here. So this is not definitive, of course, but Agalost, Ashes Against the Grain, I don't know that well. Traced in Air from Cynic. There's a bunch of death. I don't know Death. Never gotten into Death. Oddly enough, I like bands that were highly influenced by Death, but, I don't know. Part of it's the style. It's more just death metal than anything else with Death. But Edge of Sanity, those two, that's one of the only two. Epple Duath, that's an album that I've been meaning to listen to for a long time. Evergrey Recreation Day. I know these Galactic Cowboys album. I might even put the last one on here. But yeah, Gorguts, Obscura. That's a classic death metal album, like technical death metal. Those two Eson albums. In Flames, they have a long catalog, melodic death metal. I don't have a lot of melodic death metal in here, a little bit, but Martyrs, previous, their second to last album, Warp Zone, never heard. Blood Mountain. Actually, I think I did add Blood Mountain. I should take that off that part. Yeah, I did take. I try to proofread this stuff as much as I can. Let's just go through and take it off right when I'm recording here. Oops, that's on the first one. Well, anyway, I believe Blood Mountain's on here. I'm just gonna start going through the list though. So, and the two Toll Hider albums at the bottom. Voivod album, 2 Spawn of Possession albums. There's albums that just didn't make the list because I couldn't. And Obscura, there's a bunch of albums from Obscura that I can't figure. I can't choose like a definitive one. Mr. Bungle. So Psychotic Waltz, Social Grace, number 201. Shaolin Death Squad. I mean, that's one of a few different Psychotic Waltz albums on this list. A band that I should like more. They're kind of almost in that category. I've listened to them. I know certain songs, but I'm not passionate about any one album. But that sort of was one of their more well-known records. I stuck at 201. Shaolin Death Squad, 5 Deadly Venoms. I like the music on this album, but the production bugs me, and so that's kind of why it's this low. Altura Mercy. They're one of many bands on this list from the Magna Carta label, in the 90s, early 2000s. Mercy, very influenced by Dream Theater and Rush and Fate's Warning, and very much the same category. The Quiet Room, they have a couple records. This is the better of the two, Introspect from 1997. So I'm just going to keep going here. Agalost, Faustian Echoes, and EP. I'm including some EPs on here. I like this EP, not as much as some of their EPs, including the White EP, which isn't on here, because the White EP isn't metal in the least. It's really just like a post-rock folk EP with samples. Seventh Sign, Perpetual Destiny, very Queensryche-like from 95. Unfortunately, the singer passed away. I guess it was a couple years ago in 2018, but this was one of the recommended albums when I was getting into prog metal, Dream Theater, and Queensryche, and Fate's Warning. And I always liked this album, although it's one of those albums where the whole album is good, but there's not too many songs specifically. Like I was listening to this like probably a couple times a year for a while, but Aurora, the first track, I remember. But it's been many years. I have this on CDC. lot when I was obsessed with Fate 20, Cruise like Dream Theater. Yeah. If you like that style of 90s prog metal, though, definitely Perpetual Destiny is one to check out if you can find it. They have another record I've never listened to, but anyway. Okay, so the second Automata from Between the Buried and Me. Between the Buried and Me I don't like nearly as much after pretty much of all the releases after Colors. That's a simple play. So that's kind of in the cat. I don't mind this. The Automata 1 and 2. I didn't even put the first one on here, to be honest. So, Brain Drill Apocalyptic Feasting. This is some of the most technical music I've ever listened to, but it's really mood music. There's a few other records on this list that are really sort of, I don't call them necessarily purely self-indulgent, but it's kind of like how far you push yourself instrumentally and in an extreme vein. I know some people called it grindcore, like just average grindcore, but no, I mean, they kind of lived up to their name. They've done some other records since. It's very much of a feast or famine thing. If you don't like this, you're just never going to want to listen to it all. If you like it, you're going to be like really good for what kind of style they're doing. And I guess the name and even the title of the record and the artwork sort of fit like what you get. It's not really hiding anything. You kind of get what what you think you're going to get with it. And when I want to listen to some really technical music, this would be one of my go-tos. Saigon Kick's Waters. Now, in the description I said there's some bands that aren't really prog. Saigon Kick isn't really prog, but they kind of have their moments. And Jason Bieler, for example, Bieler, I think it's Bieler, is doing really prog metal now, and so his roots are still influenced by progressive rock. So that's why Saigon Kick is going to be on this list. This is probably, I did that review. I got the first record on vinyl, and that's not on here. But this would be like my third favorite Saigon Kick album in their catalog. So that's just kind of spoiling it a little bit. Anyway, let me do something here. So going on, I'm not even showing the numbers. My apologies for that. Pain of Salvation's most recent album, Panther, which I like. It's kind of industrial sounding at points. Almost like, what's that description? Punk. Steampunk, almost, with the sort of black sort of sheen of the artwork and the style. But, I mean, it has some moments. I know people loved it. I've never fully warmed up to it. I like moments, and I think it's the last track, Icon, is one of their better sort of quote mid-level epics. And they've never really written a song much longer than 13 minutes. But yeah, I mean, this is Accelerator's good. The weird thing I always associated with this, all the tracks when I got this were all in caps. I always think of all the song titles in caps. Wait is one of the other favorites on this, but I'm a huge Pain of Salvation fan, so in their catalog, this is not very high. That's why it's number 192, but it's still a decent record. It's heavier than the World Sound albums, for example. I don't even think are metal. The Great Misdirect from Between the Buried and Me, one of the most disappointing albums of all time. Swim to the Moon and Obfuscation are two of the highlights on this, but I really have not listened to this since it came out in 2009 because I felt like they were just getting way too self-indulgent, kind of like a lot of their records. But I know I have not gone back to it. I know people have kind of given this, like, it's kind of grown on people. I think a lot of people felt the same way after they did Colors, that it just didn't really live up to that, and some people actually prefer this record to Colors now. So anyway, number 191, another Between the Buried and Me, Parallax 2. This record, unlike the Great Misdirect, has become this cult record that people love. Some people consider it their best record. It's too long. I mean, some of the moments are there. That thing about the space suit and everything like that. It just, I don't remember how long it is, but it meanders just like the Great Misdirect. It's 72 minutes, and I struggled with it. And I mean, I like some moments of it, but yeah, Silent Flight Parliament, that's kind of that 50-minute epic. Yeah, I mean, it just, I felt like with Between the Buried and Me, they were sort of trailblazers before, and then they kind of just said, let's just become pure prog and write as many long-winded parts as we want to. We don't really care. That's fine. I don't know. It's every time I've listened to Between the Buried and Me in the last decade, I've just kind of gotten that sense, whereas their earlier records I didn't. So anyway, number 190. Number 189, Without Warning, another 90s prog metal band. This is their final release, Step Beyond. Very Dream Theater-esque, but the vocalist is not like Labrie. He has a little bit of a rasp to his voice. And they have 3 records, and I like all of them. This isn't my favorite, but one of the better ones. I don't know if it's on the streaming services. It'd be nice, or it might be on where you can get the MP3s, like maybe on the Apple. I don't, the title track would be my first choice, but I haven't listened to it. I bought it. I haven't listened to it in a long time, but just from memory, and it's their highest rated on Rate Your Music, so I put it on the list. Number 189. Number 188, another Magna Carta band, Lemur Voice, Insights. I never heard the second one. Like, I remember shying away from that. That's actually rated a little higher, but I'm not familiar with the second one. Insights, though, the second one I think is called Divided. And then they end up doing Sun Cage, which I never got into them either. I just remember the line, beat something into the masses. I mean, it's very Dream Theater, very jazzy-like. It's almost predictable, but I kind of found that, like, compared to a few of the other bands kind of in this, it's fusion-y. They were more jazzy, and they had enough melodies that I liked them enough where it stayed with me. I would go back to Lemur Voice. In fact, I think I even played a song from them on KFA Radio many years back when I was doing it in that first run there. Anyway, number 188, Lemur Voice, Insights. Number 187, Savatage Streets Rock Opera. I like a lot of Savatage albums, even though this isn't purely prog, it's conceptual. And they were working with Paul Neal, of course, at this point. I believe this is the first instance of the song Believe, which may have been on 2 of their other releases. I can't remember, like bonus tracks on Edge of Thorns and Handful of Rain, but this is would be the final album that had John Oliva as the lead singer until their final record. So the last one, there was a gap before Zach Stevens joined. But I like this record, but not as much as some of their others. Anyways, I still like Streets. Number 186, Queensryche, Rage for Order. Somewhat of a classic by people. Not as good as some of their other records. In fact, I don't think I included The Warning on here. Maybe I did. I like some of the songs on here, but again, I'm not... See, like, this whole, like, bottom 201 to 1... whatever, it's going to be... It's splitting hairs, of course, totally. Walk in the Shadows, New Regale, London, Screaming in Digital, I Will Remember. I Want to Get Close to You, which was, I believe, a cover. Isn't that on here? Because they did it... Yeah, Gonna Get Close to You. There's some good songs on this. It did not resonate with me... as much as the 3 records that followed it, which is pretty much standard for a lot of fans, actually. But a lot of the fans that like that era like this era more than the stuff that came after it, which is, lineup changes mainly. But anyway, Rage for Order 186, 185, Dolly's Dilemma, Manifesto for Futurum from 99. The big thing about this band, they were a prog metal band that sounded like, at one point, U2. Which Dream Theater themselves were obviously fans of U2, and they had some songs that sound like U2. And I think Matt Gullery, who played with Dolly's Dilemma and James Labrie, I think he's with Dolly's. I think this is his band. I'm pretty sure this is Matt Gullery's band. That was part of it, and well, maybe not. Matt Gullery is mentioned. Yeah, so. I know that people love this album, and I liked it. I never was blown away by it, but I liked it enough. Again, you interchange it with Lemur Voice, some of these other bands for that era. Again, the U2 element was they were a little more melodic, and they were technical enough, but not overly technical. But anyway, Dolly's Dilemma, number 185 from Manifesto for Future from 1999. Number 184, so I did have The Warning on here, and that's splitting hairs. The Warning, their debut album from Queensryche, which has Take Hold of the Flame and NM 156, 156. Those are my biggest, the title track, Enforce. This is more raw, heavy metal, power metal. Yeah, it's less proggy, although the funny thing is, there's going to be other Queensryche albums in here I'll be talking more about that are more proggy, that there's different reasons. I don't know, That was right when Fate's Warning came out, and not that long after Iron Maiden had come out. So that whole style, and a lot of the other, new wave of British heavy metal and American bands were kind of, aping off of it, that style. It wasn't thrash metal exactly. The thrash scene obviously had started around the same time or a little bit earlier. Metallica, Megadeth, Anthrax, and Slayer. Anyway, number 184, The Warning. Number 1 by Queensryche. Number 183, Presto Ballet, Peace Among the Ruins. Kurt Vanderhoof from Metal Church. Well, I don't have Metal Church on this list. Maybe I should. I don't think they're really prog. Them and like, it's not really spoiled. I'm not going to have it, any King Diamond or his band. Forget King Diamond's band. But anyway, a little too satanic, I guess, for me. But Metal Church I kind of always associated with that style. Mercenary 2, a little bit Sacred Oath. But this was Kurt Vanderhoof's overtly doing prog. Now, you could say, well, it's not prog metal. It's probably somewhere between prog metal and prog rock and prog. I mean, it gets heavy at times, but it's retro sounding. But still good. The Presto Ballet released, I don't know, 3 or 4 of the records. But I just found that this was the best. I never was, like, fanatical, but when I checked them out, yeah, you can see, and it's actually, that's the Relic of the Modern World. That's their highest rating. I don't think I wish listed, but I never heard it. But yeah, Peace Among the Ruins is sort of my go-to. That was later, 2005, so it wasn't in that sort of neo-prog Magna Carta style. I think it was on Inside Out, and so Inside Out sort of took the mantle from Magna Carta. But yeah, Presto Ballet is good. It's fun. I mean, are there particular songs on here that I would highlight? It's been, I mean, 2005 I listened to it a fair amount. The title track, Seasons maybe, and the 7.5 minute The Fringes. But yeah, it's proggy enough, and it's close enough to metal. I mean, I'm not putting Black Sabbath or Deep Purple, the pre-80s stuff on this list. So, anyway. I gotta take a break here. I'll be right back. Alright, Kyle here again. I'm moving on. Number 183, Peace Among the Ruins from Presto Ballet. Number 182, the first, well, I think this is the only one actually, Voivod album, Nothing Face. Voivod is a band, like, again, I've listened to, I have some of their albums, and this is maybe in some ways their definitive album. But I want to like them more than I do. I don't mind them. The album that came after, Angel Rat, I think was produced by Terry Brown, but the sound is different. It's weird. It's less proggy and more straight up like hard rock and metal, so it's weird. Anyway, number 182, Voivod. Number 181, The Human Abstract, Nocturne, their debut album, 2006. This is a band that was, and they put out a couple records after this, but none of them were as good as this. In that sort of metal, progressive metalcore vein, like Between the Buried and Me, more so like Protest the Hero. And this is a fun record. I remember listening to it a lot, but at the same time, it's sort of a product of its time. Like, if you listen to it now, it might sound a little dated, but I know they were very technical at times. You look at their songs; it's just the title track, Self-Portraits of the Instincts. It's weird how they had a cult following, but then I know people that didn't really think they were that good. It was weird. There was a few other bands that were kind of similar that weren't as good as them. That was kind of my take on it. Like, they were the best of that sort of second tier or third tier. But anyway, Nocturne is my favorite album from them, maybe the best album from 2006 from The Human Abstract. They're not around anymore, sadly. Anyway, trying to move on because I'm not sure how much I'm going to be able to do with this. Leprous Coal. Another band that I kind of never fully have embraced, but this was the one album that I remember enjoying back in 2013. And they've kind of varied their styles, where they were almost more traditional prog metal at one point, and then they've gone into sort of atmospheric stuff, and this is maybe the most atmospheric of their records. And now I guess they're doing more, almost maybe popish kind of stuff. But anyway, there's a bunch of bands like this where it's like a lot of the prog and prog metal scene love. And there's moments they have, I know they toured with Between the Buried and Me and The Deer Hunter, actually, in fact. But this was the one record that kind of hit me like, yeah, this is pretty good. I understand why people like this band. But I don't have like a ton to elaborate on it. The title track, I remember it sort of fit. Like, it was epic, but they weren't too epic, the songs on this album. Anyway, yeah, the vocal style, it's sort of, they were influenced a little bit by, you could call that sort of progressive art rock, the heavy progressive art rock like Dead Letter Circus or Fair to Midland or Carnival. Carnival's not on this list either, and arguably they could be on here too, because are they metal, and are they I didn't include everything, unfortunately, in this list. I did as much as I could. Number 179, The Mantle from Agalloch. This is my favorite Agalloch full-length album, I guess you could say. Or I don't know, it's splitting hairs. It's atmospheric. I love the atmosphere on this record. Anyway, I'm not going to say a lot more. Number 178, Ideology. This is Charlie Engin's band. Who's a drummer from my hometown. And it's somewhat extreme metal. I mean, it's not traditional prog metal, but there's a lot of elements of traditional prog metal. And it was, the people that heard it liked it. It just kind of went under the radar. But I know he's drumming for a much bigger name band now. I think it's Five Finger Death Punch. So, but this was kind of one of his babies. I don't know. It doesn't feature Tedros Ramos. I don't know if they list him. But I remember he was the one who was like promoting this back in 2016 a lot. And, yeah, I mean, for being a fan of, I wouldn't call it influenced by Between the Bear to me. It's sort of somewhere between Opeth and Dream Theater, but kind of, the vocalist doesn't sound like Michael Ackerfeld or Labrie. It's kind of somewhat sort of in the middle. I mean, there's not a lot of extreme vocals, but there's a little bit. Ideology's self-titled album from 2016. Moving on, I'm trying to get through this as fast as possible. This hopefully won't be 13 videos. Maybe it'll be like 5 or 6. I don't know. Mastodon, their album from 2021, Hushed and Grim. A long record, and Mastodon's a band I wanted to like more than I ever did, like many of these bands, but this album is really long. It's really a double album, but it's consistently good. That's the best thing I can say about it. I mean, naming tracks, it's sort of, again, exhaustive. I mean, again, it's an 86-minute record. I don't know. I remember in the middle here liking song after song, like More Than I Could Chew, The Beast, Skeleton and Splendor. Some of the guitar textures are great. I remember this reminded me a little bit of Burst, and I was like, they're finally catching up to Burst after all these years. But anyway, Mastodon, one of the better Mastodon records, although, they seem to kind of all be around the same level to me. It's weirdly. They're not all in the same ranking, but 177, Hushed and Grim. Number 176, the first Subterranean Masquerade album on this list, Mountain Fever, that came out in 2021. The second album that, where they really didn't resemble their earlier sound. They changed and resembled some of the other bands more than their own, but it's still good music. The songwriting's still good. It's maybe more Middle Eastern sounding than some of their others, actually. Snake Charmer, Diaspora My Love, the title track, Yeah, that's my best description. I mean, is it metal? Yeah, there's a few moments of extreme vocals, some growling, and some nice riffs. They have some of the chamber elements in it. Yeah, and there's some Pink Floyd elements, So it's good. I don't like it as much as some of the other records, but it's still a decent record. They're pretty consistent. Tomare Pink, Subterranean Masquerade, Mountain Fever from 2021, Bleeding from Psychotic Waltz. Again, with Psychotic Waltz, it's kind of a blur, their records to me. But I know this album has maybe my favorite Psychotic Waltz song, In My Grave. I believe that's the one that very much channels Jethro Tull. Yeah, this is their most catchy record by some people's take. Yeah, and I have this on CD. I think I have this as a double, like a compilation CD I got. But anyway, Psychotic Waltz are a band that I know a lot of people they have a cult following. They came around like they were before certain bands, but after certain bands. They were in the 90s, really. So they kind of resembled Fate's Warning at points and Watchtower, but they were, I don't know, they also kind of were more almost falling into the cynic death element of sort of syncopated dual guitar parts and everything like that. And Bleeding, again, maybe is the catchiest one of the records anyway. Number 175. Number 174, the Arusha Chord, the Echo Verses. The best thing I could say about this album is it was a good record that kind of filled the void after Sikith had announced their breakup. This is a weird way to put it, but solid record, but it was kind of, again, of its time back in 2009. I liked it for what it was, and it was better than some. I think the production was better than, because a lot of these metal bands have loudness wars, especially around this time, the late 2000s, early 2010s. But yeah, I mean, it's experimental. It's kind of Disneyly technical passages. They're kind of they're kind of throwing stuff at the wall, and some of it sticks. But I haven't gone back to this in so long that I haven't really thought about the Arusha Chord. I think this is their only record, but it's mathcore, metalcore. Yeah, I mean, anyway. The Arusha Chord, number 174. Number 173, all right, the first Dream Theater album on here, A Dramatic Turn of Events. I like this album like many fans, even though Mike Portnoy's departure, you have Mike Mangini, the new drummer. And the reason why it's this low, clearly probably people would think, well, because it sounds so derivative of some of the previous records, especially Images and Words, which is true at points, to a degree. I think part of it is just I felt like after Portnoy left, there's something sort of missing to not like it as much as their previous work. But compared to the records that have come since, ironically, I think it's better than all of them. By a lot, actually. So, I mean, I like Distance Over Time. I didn't include that, but this album has a few different songs that I still can sort of earmark between Outcry, Breaking All Illusions. I think Breaking All Illusions is the one that had that really cool unison section. Lost Not Forgotten, the On the Backs of Angels, the song that got the Grammy nomination, and Bridges in the Sky. I mean, it's a consistently good record. It just sounds kind of like they're retreading material. I mean, but it's still good. Anyway, number 173, Dream Theater's A Dramatic Turn of Events. Number 172, Textures, Drawing Circles, the first Textures album. Oddly enough, of course, Textures got known. This is their debut album, I believe. They got known for their kind of Meshuggah influence. And I was like, well, the one band I like that does gent, because I don't like gent for the most part, is Textures. But it doesn't bother me. I don't know what it is about their sound. With a few of the records, this is what I'd consider probably my second favorite. But yeah, they give them the gent tag. But gent wasn't known in 2006. But it's a fun record. I remember enjoying the energy, but it wasn't over the top. It was just kind of fun energy, some technical parts in it, and the gent isn't overused, and bands like Periphery and bands that have come since, did have overused them. Anyway, overused it. I eventually decided gent isn't really mostly, I can only take gent in very small doses. Anyway, number 171, Protest the Hero's Volition, the first Protest the Hero album on here. I like this album, but with Protest the Hero, they're another case of a band that they have one record that stands out, another record that's better than the rest, and then this is kind of the best of the rest of those records, I mean, in some ways. What is it, Skies or Animal Bones? One of the last songs has a very unusual part for them, but this was the one, I think they did the Kickstarter, and I think I ended up buying it for that reason. Yeah, I mean, it's like, was they going to become a straight-up prog metal band? They weren't. They still have some of the metal elements. But I'm not going to be able to elaborate too much on this, but yeah, I guess I didn't buy it. I never marked it as like having the physical copy. I remember I wanted to buy this album on vinyl or CD for a while. I think I came close to it and just never got around to it. But, yeah, I mean, it's still fun. It's Protest the Hero, but it's sort of comparing, like, what else is on the list and also what the rest of their catalog looks like, which isn't really fair. This is just a definitive list of albums. They're not supposed to be comparing the rest of their catalogs. But I was trying to come up with around 200 like the last list, because the number wasn't quite 200, and this was the best to put in there. So number 171, Protest the Hero. Like I said, a lot of splitting hairs. Number 170, Sculpture, The Spear of the Lily. I cannot pronounce that word. Aurild. The debut album from Sculpture, Don Anderson of Agalok, side project. Using some chamber instruments and stuff like that. This one's a little slower than the one the two that followed it, but it has its moments. A little more atmospheric at points. That's the best way to put it, but it of course has the long titles, just like the title of the album. Yeah, I wouldn't call it melodic death metal, but it's like chamber metal. There should be a genre like chamber rock, chamber metal in some ways. The clean vocals are fine. They fit with the music itself. But anyway, this isn't my favorite Sculptured album, but still it's a decent record. I like it more than the newest record, unfortunately, or fortunately in some ways, from 98. Number 169, the second and the better of the two Shaolin Death Squad albums. The thing is, I listened to 5, Deadly Venoms more. It was based on a soundtrack to a movie from the 70s. But this album I did listen to and like. It's, again, another case of sort of, vague remembrance of it, but, yeah, Shaolin Death Squad. I mean, part of it is they're compared to like Faith No More. Faith No More is maybe one of the best comparisons to them. They combine genres. I remember the Fair to Midland fan base loved them. They were talking about them online at one point, but I mean, Shaolin Death Squad's a band that I liked, and then I sort of forgot about, unfortunately. But just for the sake of, I like their other record, but I like the production better on this record. I'm putting it at this point at number 170, number 169. Number 168, Watchtower. This is the only Watchtower release. I didn't put the two records from the 80s, unfortunately, in there, but for various reasons. I mean, I liked them, but I didn't like them as much as this. This is the best Watchtower release to me. Concepts of Math, Book 1. It's an EP. It's very technical. It kind of fits the title and the artwork in a lot of ways. But it's only an EP, but I think it's like 30 minutes. I think that the suggestion is they're going to put out a second one, a book 2, but who knows when that's going to come out. This was now, whatever it was, six plus years ago. But it's a fun, technical record. I mean, it's a lot like, in some ways, the Watchtower records from the 80s, but without the 80s cheese to me. And there's some samples in it. And, this is a fun, and it's only 20 minutes. It doesn't overstay its welcome. Watchtower, one of the pioneers of sort of technical metal, you could say. But unfortunately, the 80s stuff had a little too much hair metal. I kind of got distracted by that in some ways. Anyway, I don't think Jason McMaster. What did he sing on this? I think that they may have ended up with a different singer when this came out. It's kind of interesting how it's the name split there. No. See, they have a different singer. And that doesn't even tell there. Ron John Zermbeck, of course, his brother Bobby drummed with Fate's Warning, among others. It doesn't say on here. I know it's a different singer, but anyway, Jason McMaster, I saw sing actually at the Rush tribute that Mike Portnoy was talking about recently, because he's doing another Rush tribute for Neil Peart, or did one maybe this past weekend, with the anniversary of Neil's death, unfortunately. Anyway, number 167, Avenged Sevenfold, The Stage. Simply put, this is Avenged Sevenfold doing prog metal overtly, and it's an epic record. Although I'll admit that I liked it, but I didn't go back to it that as much as I thought I should. The last track is 15 minutes to exist. I remember enjoying that. The title track, the bookends are probably the highlights, but this is, they obviously were influenced by Dream Theater, and the drummer that passed away, unfortunately, the Rev. He was a big fan of Portnoy, but having Portnoy join the band at one point, eventually they were going to completely go pure prog metal. I have a few other Avenged Sevenfold albums on my list that I like more than this, but I can't deny that this in some ways is their most proggy album and the most enjoyable anyway. Number 166, Behemoth's Demigod. This is Behemoth's best album to me, although I've hardly listened to all their albums. But it's the favorite album from them of mine, of my favorite of theirs rather. The best way to put it is, it's brutal technical death metal. But I think the best thing about this is that it's not as sort of monotonous, and it's not that it's only a 41-minute record. The drumming is my favorite part of Behemoth. But it's unfortunately sometimes with technical death metal and brutal death metal, it's got to vary in some ways. A lot of their other albums don't vary enough, but this just kind of works beginning to end well enough. And I think it worked even when I saw them live. Some of the stuff they played from it worked even better. But yeah, Demigod, my go-to from Behemoth, number 166. Number 165, Gojira is the Way of All Flesh, the first Gojira album on here. I like Gojira. They're an incredibly intense band, sometimes over the top. I remember liking this album a lot, but it was very moodish, and I know that it's considered their best record actually on Rate Your Music here. It's an epic record in some ways, whatever it is, 75 minutes. So it's, again, very much Randy Blythe from Land of God, I believe, sings on that track, but yeah, see, the last 2/3 of this album is good. I'm not following all the hate. Yeah, I remember people were hating on it at first, but they've grown to love it. So I'm sort of caught in the middle. But I remember when I saw them live, they weren't the intensity of their music and the recordings didn't come across as much. But this was one. The Way of All Flesh. It's just over the top. If you want really thick, dense, intense, very passionate death metal or progressive death metal, this is a good one to look at. It's not their sort of signature record to some people, which I'll get to later, but, you know, I'm still a fan of it. I have it on CD. Anyway, I believe I do. Number 164, We Are the Nightmare from Arsis. I only put one Arsis album on here. They have one, the previous album, the debut, I like a lot too. I like, at least. I remember the thing about this album the best is that the energy level is off the charts. And that's what I look for oftentimes in melodic death metal, technical death metal, any type of death metal in general. If it just has that flow of energy, I can just kind of bang my head to it, you know, just kind of air guitar and just feel the flow of it. And the flow of this record is really good. I remember it was 2008. It finished in like my top 25, 30 records that year for that reason. I don't like to have any specifics. I mean, the first track, I don't have like total favorites on this. It's just beginning to end a very enjoyable, fun ride to listen to. Arsis, you know, it's intense, it's kind of badass in a lot of ways. We Are the Nightmare. I think they're from like Baltimore. Anyway, number 163, Savage's Gutter Ballet, another Savatage album, the pre-Zach Stevens. I know they used like some flute on this record, I think. Again, working with Paul O'Neill. I remember I was thinking I was going to like this album more than I did when I got into Savatage. But being that as it may, I still enjoy this album enough. And, but, you know, I mean, again, the John Oliva vocal Savatage, it's kind of one of those things where I've enjoyed it, but I've never fully embraced it. But it's been many years. You know, it varies. The stuff with Zach Stevens, as you'll come to learn, ranks higher, scores higher, has always scored higher for me, and that's where I was introduced to the band, so it kind of naturally does more for nostalgia than anything else. So, but yeah, Gutter Ballet, it's a fun record. It's one of the late '80s Savatage. I have this on cassette tape. I remember listening to my car a number of times. But you know, I don't have a lot of specifics I can name. But yeah, I mean, is it purely prog? No. Again, the pre Zach Stevens stuffs are like, I almost don't consider prog, but it's sort of like had its prog-ish and sort of rock opera moments. It sort of fits under the umbrella to me. Anyway, number 163, number 162, and we're looking at for time because this video is going to go close to an hour if I don't watch it. Yeah, we're looking at 36 minutes probably if I combine these two. All right, I'll try to get to 150. Green Carnation, Leaves of Yesteryear. And Green Carnation, I'll fully admit I have not heard all their albums, but this is their most recent record from 2020, their first album in many years. They have one obviously very famous record that scores a lot higher on this, but this album has that 15-minute track, My Dark Reflections of Life and Death. You know, it's doom metal without the sort of the slow, drony moments, and that's what I have problems with, the sort of, you know, doom metal stuff that goes too slow for me. But it's, for whatever reason, the atmosphere that Green Carnation creates, I don't have a problem with it, and so it doesn't really go into that territory. Gothic metal fits, you know. Yeah, I mean, this was nice. I guess that's the best way to put it. I didn't get addicted to it, but it finished relatively high on my list in 2020. Partly to do with the year of 2020, partly to do with the year of music 2020, but probably because I just found it to be pretty decent, you know. But I need to go back to it. It's only been a few years, and I honestly need to explore the Green Carnation catalog in depth. In fact, then at some point I might just do a full video on there. Of course, the singer from Green Carnation also has sang with, I believe it's Subterranean Masquerade, so there's connections to other bands I like. So anyway, yeah, I did include Blood Mountain from Mastodon. So anyway, this is sort of that trilogy of records in the 2000s from Mastodon, the least of the three, I guess you could say, or the trilogy of the run that I enjoyed. Another band that I haven't heard every record of. I've still yet to hear Remission. I would see that CD and even the vinyl on the shelves at the stores often. But Blood Mountain is good, but I own it on CD. But if I'm listening to Mastodon, it's not always my go-to. Although I remember, yeah, The Wolf is Loose. That was the one that they kind of opened as a single back when this came out in 2006. But yeah, I mean, I think part of it is it didn't have as many over-the-top moments as some of the other records that surrounded it. But I know that, you know, the progressive rock scene wanted to embrace it because they thought it was a concept album. And I mean, before this, Mastodon wasn't talked about that much in prog, even though they were progressive metal. But yeah, I mean, and Mastodon is a band that I was wanted to love more than I have, and sort of this was maybe part of the issue. Is like, it's good. And look where it's rated on Rate Your Music's chart from 2006, number 22. The Sound Opinions guys, yeah, the hipsters started to embrace them right around this time, and I kind of felt a little uneasy. I shouldn't base my taste on what other people think or how popular something becomes, but sometimes it kind of gets thrown down your throat and your ears, and it hurts your interest. But still, it's not a bad record. I mean, I like this album more than some of the records that came out, in the coming years. They've put out many records, and so still a decent record, but just not quite as high. Anyway, number 160, Born of Osiris is The New Rain. This is technically an EP. This is their debut release. It initially was considered a full length, even though it was like 21 minutes. It's metalcore with a lot of breakdowns and stuff, and deathcore. It's actually considered deathcore. And deathcore is known for the breakdowns, I think, in metalcore. Deathcore. The reason why I don't mind this compared to a lot of other deathcore is because it doesn't overstay its welcome because it's so short. But again, it got reclassified as an EP. Yeah, there's a Between the Buried and Me influence. There's, if I'm not mistaken, there's a couple of, not gent moments, but, like dubs. There's some odd little humorous moments in here, kind of the way that Between the Buried and Me would throw in there. And unfortunately, and I liked some of the records that came since, but I just haven't had reason to listen to them that much. So this kind of remains my favorite thing, and really the only thing that finds this list on here. They had Discovery, which was decent, but I think it's partly to do with deathcore. It's like Gent. I only can take it in small doses, and that's why this works. It's part of its charm. It's only 21 minutes, kind of like a lot of the EPs on this list. So, Born of Osiris. And I even saw them live once, and it was fun. They were nice guys. I know they were big fans of Misery Signals, who I'd never heard of at that point either. The Misery Index. I can't remember which band. It's like there were couple bands with the word Misery in it. Number 159, the first Orphan Land album on here, Unsung Prophets and Dead Messiahs, the most recent full length, I believe. Orphan Land's, their albums, other than like one or two, consistently have two traits. They have a lot of good moments. They have the death metal growls, and they have the sort of ethnic folk instrumentation. But the other thing is, they're always long. A little bit like sort of the post-rock bands, like the Flower Kings or the Apples in Stereo. And so that's why they failed to sort of get over that hump a lot of their albums for me. But at the same time, I can't deny that they have moments I enjoy that I still like them. And they bring different things in. So, yeah, I mean, this one's maybe a little more overtly, they had Steve Acker as a guest. I was thinking more overtly Middle Eastern. Just with the title. But they're always sort of biblical and religious sounding references and titles in basically all their albums. Everything's prophetic. And like sort of literary, sort of biblical literary, or anyway. It's a fun record. I didn't expect to like it as much, given that they kind of are doing the same thing over and over again. Yeah, it's a little more folky than some of the other records, but it's their newest record too. I may go back to it and feel like it's better than some of the other records later. It's better than some of the records that's behind. Number 159, Orphan Lands, Unsung Prophets and Dead Messiahs. 158, the second, I believe it's the final album I have on this list from Without Warning, Believe. The album that I was introduced to them, I was at a record show back in 95, right when I was, not that long after. I think it was 95 or 96. Getting into Dream Theater, trying to find bands like Dream Theater. I love Dream Theater. This Impulse Music CD distribution label with metal and prog metal and power metal was there in the Twin Cities, in Eagan, and they suggested this, and it had John Petrucci's name on it, and it was distributed to Japan and all this stuff. It was their second album, and I liked it. I mean, is it derivative of Dream Theater? Yes, but I can say this is the one I've listened to the most. My go-tos were, and I haven't listened to it. I mean, I listened to it maybe once or twice over the last decade, and some of it does sound dated. I think I loved it more back then. I would listen to it at work with headphones and stuff. Envisioned, let's see here. Envision, Deepest Dreams, In My Name. Those were and Believe in Me. Every one of them had like a keyboard part or, some dynamic section. Evil Needs. It's pretty consistent. A little bit like Men, Women, and Children, that the whole album sounds similar in a lot of ways, but I used to spotlight those individual tracks. Again, the singer, I believe the singer's name was like Jack Belletta, had a quite distinct sounding voice. Yep. Actually, as much as they Dream Theater, they tried to sprinkle little distinctions in their sound. They didn't really have any like long-winded songs, and the solos they had in there weren't that long. So in that sense, they were more song-oriented than Dream Theater ever was, for better or for worse. Almost like when Dream and Day unite in a sense. Like, have a different kind of singer, almost like a Wake-era James LaBrie, because he kind of had that gruff sound, and sort of doing when Dream and Day unite style That would be my best description. And when I got into Dream Theater, when Dream a Day Unite, not to spoil too much, was one of my favorite albums of theirs. So I was listening to it a ton. So this was right up my alley. Anyway, 158, Without Warning, Believe. I'll try to get to 150 and then call it a day. Arch Matheos, Sympathetic Resonance. I've gone on about this album. I did the review on it. I loved it when it came out. I've kind of, soured on it a bit recently partly because it's a little long-winded. A lot of the sections go on for a while. That being said, I can't deny it's still, it's John Arch and Jim Matheos doing prog metal, and it has enough sections I enjoy. I don't know, it's weird how you can go back and forth sometimes with albums. My favorites would be Midnight Serenade and Incense and Mirth, probably. Neurotically Wired was the first song I heard from it. I remember they put that up online. I can't really say a lot more because I feel like I've talked about this album more than enough when I revisited and doing the Fates Warning stuff a few months ago. So, anyway, Arch Matheos, Sympathetic Resonance, number 157. Number 156, The Lizard from Saigon Kick. Again, we're talking about a band that's really not purely prog metal, but they are influenced by some prog, and some of their albums are. I've always liked all the Saigon Kick albums, basically, for different reasons. Love Is on the Way was the pop hit on this album. They're more overtly, their DNA is in sort of pop metal, hair metal, alternative rock, and alternative metal, you could say, or whatever. But it's a fun record. I remember when I discovered, it's sort of in that Faith No More extreme, that even the funk metal stuff that it was getting into. I'm Mother Earth a little bit too, although I'm Mother Earth isn't metal, but I don't know, is it sacrilege to put them on a list like this? I don't know. I just think they kind of fit the era and the style to an extent. They even toured with Dream, or like at least played on a show, if not toured with Dream Theater. They went on. They had a show with Dream Theater. I know because Portnoy complained about how they wouldn't get off the stage or something once. Anyway, Saigon Kick, The Lizard, number 156, 155. The most recent album from Norway's In Vain, Currents. Another album that I enjoyed a lot the year it came out. I bought it on vinyl. I showed it on camera on YouTube a few years ago, and I haven't really listened to it since. I don't like it as much as some of their others, but at the same time, it still wasn't bad. It's sort of a hard way to put it. That's why I didn't make the top 100, 150, I guess. But anyway, In Vain's Currents. They're melodic death metal, blackened death metal. I think this was less metal. Someone described it new metal. No. The artwork's a little kind of washy in that color. I never loved the artwork. The artwork kind of threw me off a little bit because the other artwork I felt fit their sound more. But anyway, kind of talking about oceans and tides like Poseidon and stuff like that. But they use samples. I think they use some samples on this too. That's one thing I always enjoyed about In Vain. But they use samples better on a couple of other records anyway. Number 154, Cynic's Carbon-Based Anatomy, the EP from 2011. Speaking of samples, if I'm not mistaken. All I know is that I remember when this came out, I liked this more than Traced in Air, and sort of it scored points with me just based on that. And I haven't listened to it much since then. In fact, I didn't even put it on. I didn't do any EPs list, so I suppose in fairness. But Applebaum Mayer, the guy who engineered it was named Applebaum or whatever. Yeah, I can't say a lot about it. I think this is the tour that I saw them on, though, because I saw them in 2011, right after, with 3, and I forget what other band was with them. Oh, I think it was Periphery, I forget. It was 3 and them and one other band. But yeah, it's kind of less is more, but it's a fun EP, atmospheric EP from Cynic, one of their better releases from 2011, number 154. The first sort of more purely post-metal album on here, Strike a Mortal Terror from Shelter Red from 2009. This is kind of like heavy Porcupine Tree instrumental in some ways. It's atmospheric, but it's very riffy. That's about the best way to describe it. Someone's comparing it to Mastodon. I don't know if I really agree with that exactly, but it's 31 minutes, so it sort of doesn't overstay its welcome, and it's a fun record. Very energetic record. If you want to work out to something, this would be a good choice. Anyway, Strike a Mortal Terror. I believe they're from Portland, like many other bands I love from Portland, Oregon. Shelter Red. And they put out some other records I enjoy, but this is my favorite of theirs. Number 152, Subterranean Masquerade. The second one, Vagabond. The second most recent. The first one that did not feature the services of Paul Coor. That being said, it's still a good record. Again, you have the singer from Green Carnation. I forget his name. I think he's from Green Carnation. Shell Nordis, Sheltil Nordis. I'm not sure. I think so. Again, I don't want to be like inaccurate because band lineups are never easy if you don't like have it in front of you. But yeah, I mean, I like this record. I remember listening to it a fair amount. Kippur. I wonder if that's a Yom Kippur reference. I'm sure. They did a cover of Space Oddity from David Bowie. That was right after he died, of course. I remember that. It's a good cover. Hymn of the Vagabond. Yeah, I mean, this might be their shortest record. It's 47 minutes. I'm not sure, but you know, I mean, Subterranean Masquerade, a band that's pretty consistent. Although, again, some of the records are slightly better than others. So, Vagabond. I think the loss of Paul Coor was what really kind of made me not like this as much as some other others. That being said, it's still a good record. Yeah, Ariane meets Orphanland. You know, yeah, they also have one of the members of more. I can't remember if Kobe Fari's on this. He may have guessed it on this. The style is they sound more like Orphanland than their earlier stuff on this album and on Mountain Fever. But it isn't a bad thing because I love Orphanland. You know, they're going to be on this list too, of course. So anyway, 152. Number 151, Psychotic Waltz into the Everflow. So again, sort of going on partly to do with my vague experience, but also reputation. This is sort of the go-to, and I think a lot of fans consider the best record. Some people like A Social Grace more, but you know, again with you know, Psychotic Waltz, I wasn't going to put anything higher in the top 100 for them, and even the 150 as it turns out. But this is still a band that, you know, knows how to write a track that's very, you know, intricate, technical at times, with a lot of syncopation. Their vocal style is, you know, influenced by the John Arch era, Fate's Warning. You know, there's a lot of things I like about their sound. And this album, partly by reputation, kind of ended up this high. Keep in mind another thing about this list. I sort of do these with just by comparisons, and they fall where they fall. I'm not like saying I need to like this album and that album not so much because I don't know this album. It just ended up at 151 based on the Pub Meeple ranking generator after I'm doing the comparisons. Now it begs the question, well, why is it on the list anyways if I don't know it that well? That's a valid question. I'm kind of doing it just based on memory and reputation in some ways. Because it's like, well, I've had even comments about Psychotic Waltz on my channel, so I'm putting them on the list, you know, and I haven't really invested the time. The last time I listened to this album was probably over 10 years ago. I had a good friend that was really into Faith No More, and Mike Patton also liked them, and I was listening to some of their stuff. That was like 20 years ago. That was probably the last time I spent a lot of time listening to Psychotic Waltz. Of course, they put out a record a few years ago called Into the Void. I think it was Into the Void, which was on my end of year list. I was going to try to go back and try to revisit their whole catalog and never got around to it, so... Anyway, again, this could be a redux. I mentioned maybe in a year I'll redux and add some of these albums and bands that I don't have in the list, and some of these other bands that I'm only vaguely familiar with might end up in different spots. So anyway, that's like 45 minutes of rambling. Yeah, it's like 50 minutes of rambling. But thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and we'll see you next time. And I probably won't be doing another one of these videos until Tuesday based on my schedule, but I hope you tune in. I'm hoping to get this done in less than 13 videos. Hopefully it'll only be like 4 or 5 videos and move on. But I wanted to do these prog metal lists because it's like been itching at me. But I have other things coming up that I want to do. I want to do a Kevin Gilbert song list. I want to do a Dream Theater song list on more songs of the year, and then like the Empire song list. There's a lot of lists that are coming if given the time, and in time they will be coming. The Deer Hunter song list, the Marillion song list, a lot of song lists. But this progressive metal thing has been sort of bugging me for many months. Especially after I did the progressive art rock list, it's like I may as well just do it. So again, thank you for watching. Please subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and we'll see you next time.